Have you ever looked at a map and thought, why does this country exist? Now, with this topic, I don't mean that these countries actually shouldn't exist, but I just want to bring to light a few of them that sometimes raise questions when we think about why they are an independent nation. But the point of this video isn't to reinforce those claims, it is rather to address them and in some cases point out why they are partially wrong and why those countries do in fact have reasons to exist. I think there's three cases in which the existence of a country is put into question. One, when they don't represent a nation per se. Two, when they are geographically super small and exist within another country. And three, when they already don't have that much political autonomy. Each of the countries we'll take a look at in this video fulfill at least one of these criteria, so let's take a look at which those are. First, Belgium. It's almost a meme at this point, why Belgium exists, but the origin of the question has a valid point. Belgium itself doesn't really have their own national identity. Half the country in the north are Flemish, being culturally similar to the Dutch, and the other half in the south are Wallonian, being culturally closer to the French, each speaking their respective languages. There's even a small border area where German is predominant, and Brussels, which is a mix of everything due to its status as the EU capital. Almost every election is a deadlock, people in each side threaten with independence all the time, and a separation and creation of two new national states would not be so surprising, or an annexation of half by the Netherlands and France. So why does it exist in the first place? Belgium became independent from the Netherlands in a revolution in 1830, largely due to dissatisfaction about the Dutch king's rule, and also due to the fact that the majority of people in the southern provinces that would become Belgium were Roman Catholic, while those in the north were Dutch Protestants. After this, European powers recognized Belgium's independence and the new country was established. So why did they? Well, maybe they just liked seeing the Netherlands weakened. Maybe they thought it was a chance of conquering the territory without having to go to war with the Dutch. Maybe they thought they could at least exert more influence on it, or maybe it was convenient for them to have an extra country there. A lot of people argue that the latter was the most valid point, with the creation of a new buffer state between France and the Germans. The Dutch tried to retake it, and it was precisely the French who helped the Belgians resist. Throughout history, they have remained independent, recovering that independence when temporarily lost, remaining sovereign, even though divided, up to today. Then Lesotho and Eswatini. For both, colonial history is the reason for their independence. Let's start with Lesotho. South Africa as a country is the result of the Union of South Africa colony gaining independence from the British. In turn, the Union of South Africa was formed by uniting four separate British colonies: Cape, Natal, Transvaal, and Orange. Lesotho, then called Basutoland, already had a big population of natives at the time, enough to be considered a state of their own even by the colonists. It ended up being a protectorate of Britain. The Union of South Africa petitioned to annex them, but the British had granted them autonomy and right of self-governance. The disastrous Boer Wars had just taken place, so that may have been a reason why they wanted to avoid a potential new conflict. South Africa became independent in the 1930s, while Lesotho only in the 60s. At that point, South Africa implemented full-blown apartheid, and Lesotho, with its majority native African population, couldn't possibly join up with a regime like that. They have grown closer with South Africa in present days and are very dependent on them economically and militarily, but still remain independent. Eswatini has a similar situation. They were relevant enough to be seen as a separate state by colonists. When South Africa became independent in the 30s and partially cut ties with the British, Eswatini remained a British protectorate, reaching independence at a time when conciliation with South Africa was impossible, also due to apartheid. Essentially, they were always separate, and the only time that union seemed possible, another reason prevented it. If it should come in the future is a question we can't answer, but that is the case for most countries on this list. But wait a minute, because before I keep going, I have to tell you about today's sponsor and friend of the channel, NordVPN. It goes without saying at this point, NordVPN is the best VPN out there. It's the only one that's super fast. I use it almost on a daily basis to watch shows that aren't available in my location for streaming services. NordVPN also sets itself apart from other competitors because of their complete complete set of services for online security. There's so many good ones that it's difficult to choose. Two amazing ones are MeshNet, which is a new way to safely access other devices no matter where in the world they are. It works just like LAN by connecting devices directly, perfect for sharing files quicker or for gaming, and also threat protection, which keeps away all trackers, malware, pretty much like an incorporated antivirus. Also, depending on which sign-up package you choose, you can get 2 additional services that, in my opinion, are completely worth it. First, NordLocker, which stores and encrypts all your important files, and then NordPass, which stores and manages all of your passwords, keeping them safe. So get NordVPN on a 2-year plan with 4 months free at nordvpn.com/knowledge. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee at nordvpn.com/knowledge. Now back to the video. Another one is the Gambia. The Gambia, despite having coastal access, is an enclave within Senegal. It's the odd example of a country that essentially exists along a river, precisely the Gambia River. So why wasn't it absorbed into Senegal? The reason is colonial history. I got a lot of info from the Ask Historians subreddit. I highly recommend it if you want in-depth information about historical topics. Trading rights on the Gambia River were originally claimed by the Portuguese and then sold to the British in the late 1500s. The Gambia became a British colony, while Senegal was a French one. Each colony then gained independence separately, Senegal from France in the 1960s and the Gambia from Britain in 1965. While some did want unity between them, there were logistical barriers in terms of administration, laws, etc. Unification attempts were made right at the start, but no one seemed to really support it. In 1981, after an attempted coup in Gambia, the Senegalese military intervened and formed the Senegambia Confederation, which lasted until 1989. They couldn't come to an agreement on trade policies, and it seemed that people still weren't that interested, so they each went back to full independence. And a permanent union might have gone wrong. In the case of Amazonia, which I did a video about, gathering 2 formerly separate colonies of the French and the British into one independent country, it didn't go well. Back in Europe, Moldova. A lot of people, even seemingly a good amount of Moldovans, state that the country should just unite with Romania. They face a lot of problems, including a looming Russian threat through the breakaway state of Transnistria, and most of their people are ethnically Romanian anyway, so why are they their own country? There is some historical context. When the Kingdom of Romania was first created in 1881, it succeeded the United Principalities of Moldova and Wallachia, although today's country of Moldova is only around half of the historical principality. After World War I, Romania saw its territory grow immensely. They got Bessarabia from the Russians, Transylvania from Hungary, and a few other territories too. Throughout World War II, they lost much of those territories, some to the Soviet Union, which created the Moldovan Socialist Soviet Republic. When the USSR fell apart, the area of Bessarabia declared independence as a sovereign Moldova. Romania was facing serious internal struggles at the time, and so they couldn't really reach out a helping hand or a proposal for reunification. A lot of Moldovans have moved to Romania and then elsewhere in the EU, but many still claim for reunification today. And for the rest, we have San Marino. San Marino's existence is also due to history. Essentially, it's always been around. It's in fact one of the oldest countries in the world. Throughout time, it managed to remain independent through its advantageous location on top of hills, making it difficult to conquer, as well as through diplomacy. Plus, it's not a super valuable place that big powers wanted to conquer, but why didn't it join Italy when Italian unification came around, like all the other really small Italian states? And the reason? Friendship. In the 1800s, the country took in many people who were persecuted for supporting the unification of Italy before the movement was successful. Eventually, when those revolutionaries did succeed, they remember the help that San Marino had provided, and a friendship treaty guaranteed its continuing independence from a united Italian state. Liechtenstein is another one. They're small, sparsely populated, economically dependent on Switzerland, and culturally similar to Austria, so why are they a country? Liechtenstein avoided being a part of Austria or even Switzerland because they got a late start in being defined as a country. Before 1719, they were just an area ruled by different dynasties of the Holy Roman Empire. That year, after purchasing the lands, the ruling dynasty was granted sovereignty as a member of the HRE and then of the Confederation of the Rhine, due to good relations with Napoleon, and then the German Confederation after that. Their membership in all these confederations led to them maintaining their independence, especially because they weren't that interesting of a place to conquer either. But so was the case for many other HRE fiefdoms. So why did they merge into Germany and or Austria, but not Liechtenstein? Well, regarding Germany, it's located on the Swiss-Austrian border, so not sharing a border with any other German states, it was logically left out. Their close relationship with Austria and their declaration of permanent neutrality led them to not be annexed and just remain a close ally or friend. After World War I, this cost them heavily as they were the subject of an embargo by the Entente, causing them to seek financial aid in the Swiss, but still they survived as their own country. As one Ask Historians user put it very well, they are their own country for 3 reasons: a late start, good alliances, and not being belligerent. The other microstates of Europe, such as Monaco, Andorra, or the Vatican, are also arguably countries that shouldn't exist. Andorra especially is under the former rule of France and Spain, so why not just join them? They have been independent as a feudal domain since 1278, so I guess they do have their own culture and identity. Monaco seems to be little more than a haven for millionaires, being dependent on France for all else. Well, the relationship with France seems precisely the reason. In the Franco-Monegasque Treaty of 1861, France recognized the existence of a sovereign Monaco by buying 95% of its territory and handling its defense. It's effectively a modern French protectorate, and the Vatican is just the headquarters of Christianity and not much of a political entity at all. This one is, I believe, the one that raises the most questions about being called a country. North Korea is another obvious case. Throughout most of its existence, even during foreign occupations by neighboring empires, Korea has existed as one single entity. Sure, there were times in history when the peninsula was separated between different rulers, like the 3 kingdoms of Korea in 476 or the North and South states of 1698, but since around 918, with the establishment of the Kingdom of Goryeo, they have been united. And this only changed with the end of World War II, over 1,000 years later. From about 1910 until the end of the Second World War, the Korean peninsula was occupied by the Empire of Japan. When the Japanese lost the war, Korea was occupied by the Allied forces, the Soviet Union was responsible for the northern half, and the United States for the south. Each supported the establishment of a friendly regime in their half, which claimed rule over the entire peninsula. As the Cold War began, Korea turned into a proxy conflict and eventually a proxy war when in 1950 the North invaded the South. The war line went back and forth until an armistice was signed in 1953, not ending the war but putting a halt to the conflict and establishing a demilitarized zone along the 38th parallel. Both claim to be the true Korea and both want to reunite, but under their own control. And finally, Luxembourg. Right next to our first example of Belgium, in fact, Belgium has a province called Luxembourg, which is bigger than the country itself. The last Grand Duchy in the world has only 52% native people, initially a part of the Habsburg and then Spanish Netherlands, being a part of the Holy Roman Empire at the same time. Eventually taken by Napoleon, it became a part of the Netherlands when they still ruled Belgium as well. As Belgium became independent, they claimed Luxembourg too. In 1831, the old, larger Grand Duchy was split, part to Prussia, part to France, and most to Belgium, that mentioned province that they have today, and Luxembourg remained temporarily under Dutch control. In 1867, Luxembourg's independence was confirmed after a turbulent period which even included a brief time of civil unrest against plans to being annexed by Belgium, Germany, or France. William III of the Netherlands and sovereign of Luxembourg was willing to sell the Grand Duchy to France's Emperor Napoleon III in order to retain Limburg, but backed out when Prussian Chancellor Otto von Bismarck expressed opposition. The issue was resolved by the Second Treaty of London, which guaranteed the perpetual independence and the neutrality of the state. So essentially they exist because neither France nor Germany wanted the other to have it. So, those are some of the countries in the world that maybe shouldn't exist, but that deep down usually have very valid reasons to in fact exist. Usually their existence is disputed either by the fact that they don't represent a specific nation or people, but rather a segment of one from a neighboring country, because they are tremendously small and exist within another large country, usually depending on them economically, financially, or even militarily, or because they don't effectively have political autonomy. Again, I'm not advocating for any of these to cease existing, and the point of the video was more to understand why they effectively exist and the reasons connected to that, despite all the other reasons that could justify their disappearance. What do you think? Should these countries exist or not? And if not, what should their fate be? Also, are there any other countries that you think could maybe not exist? Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching this video, subscribe if you want, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge.